Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jake's Take with Jacob Elliott podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elliott, the chief content producer and writer of jakestake.com, a pop culture and entertainment news website. Today's a big episode. It is episode 25. I want to thank all of the guests who I've had on during the first 24 episodes. It's been incredible, 23 audio plus one incredible video interview with Christina, but I am so grateful that this fabulous woman has been our episode 25 guest. She is probably one of the best entertainers from my generation. She is one of the great master impressionists that I've ever heard. She has done everybody from the legendary divas of music such as Celine Dion and Barbra Streisand to pop princesses Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. She has made appearances world-renowned on Ellen and Queen Latifah, plus also starred on the West End with Funny Girl. Please welcome the fabulous Christina Bianco.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Jacob.
I'm so thrilled to have you, Christina. I've been a huge fan of your work since you first released that Firework video. I've been a huge fan of your work. And so how did you get interested in performing, and how did that passion evolve and desire of pursuing a career in the entertainment industry?
Well, I think the first thing is I was very lucky that I grew up just about 40 minutes outside of New York City. My parents were both born and raised in the Bronx, so they grew up in the city and then, of course, moved not so far away. And so I was always going into the city to visit my grandparents and, of course, to see great theater and great music and cabaret. So I was exposed to a lot of the arts at a very young age. And basically, my parents tell me I just could never shut up. I was always singing along, always making up my own shows and dances. I was very artistic, even as a little kid. And they saw that I had some talent for it, and so they were really good about fostering that and encouraging that. So I think I did my very first play when I was about 7. I think it was a children's theater, and it was in the summer, and it was called the Traveling Theater, and they traveled around to the school playgrounds, like those big school yards, during the summer when it wasn't in use, and they'd set up these big flats, and we'd put on productions, and you had to be 7 to audition. So I kept waiting, and the first show ever was The Wizard of Oz. And I tell this story in one of my concerts. I really wanted to be Dorothy. Who wouldn't want to be Dorothy? But I was 7, and clearly they were going to give that role to somebody who was 12 or 13. But I auditioned with such vigor and a little bit ridiculous because I had my 2 front teeth missing. But I still got up there and I gave my best rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And the director decided that it was, I think, cute enough and that I sang well enough that he wrote in that a little munchkin at the end of the show would come out and sing a reprise of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And they gave that to me. So I always say, why do I perform? Because in my very first show ever, I got to sing my favorite song ever as a solo. So I just totally created a monster.
But however, what makes you unique among our generation performers is your ability to impersonate some of the greatest entertainers of all time with your fantastic impressions. So could you share with my audience the origin story of when you got interested in impersonating?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying various versions of this story, in length, but on TV shows you have 2 seconds to tell the story, and then sometimes in print you write it all out, but people keep saying different things, so I'll set the record straight here on your show, Jacob.
Thank you, I'm honored.
I always had an ear for impressions. My parents tell me that I would mimic people all the time, but I didn't know I was doing it. I never walked into a room and said, "Hey, Ma, here's my Judy Garland. This is what I'm going to impersonate this person." I didn't even know what an impression was. I just would come home from school and say, "Oh, well, Mrs. Daly said, because we need to do this." I always just went into an impression. And so I think being exposed to many genres of music from a very young age, my dad worked in radio, so I was listening and singing along to Reba McEntire and Dolly Parton singing country music, and Bernadette Peters and Barbra Streisand doing more Broadway stuff, and then pop rock, and my generation, all the the Debbie Gibsons and Whitney Houston and the big, Cyndi Lauper, all the big singers at that time. So then I was singing along to all of those different genres. And occasionally my parents say they'd hear me take on the tone and the style of the particular artist that I was listening to. So I always had an ear for it, but I certainly didn't take it seriously, and I certainly didn't think I could do anything with it. I didn't think, oh, I will make a living or make people laugh doing this. Because honestly, even as I got older, the only people I saw doing impressions were comedians, like stand-up comedians who would throw a speaking impression in to their set. And that was just usually on TV or on a sketch comedy show like Saturday Night Live or something like that. Singing impressionists, the only thing that I had as a template was Forbidden Broadway, which I listened to out of the womb. Like it was, I was born and the show was already out, and it was just like the greatest thing for somebody who loved theater. For listeners who do not know, Forbidden Broadway is a show, a long-running off-Broadway show in New York that lovingly spoofs and parodies all of the Broadway shows and their stars and big iconic like Broadway legends. So we could do a parody for Barbra Streisand even if she wasn't currently on Broadway, but it would change every season to, of course, change with the changing shows that were on Broadway or the West End or whatnot. And so they made cast albums, and I listened to those cast albums nonstop. And looking back, I definitely was singing along, like doing an impression of the person doing an impression. Like I'm pretty sure the first way I learned how to do Liza Minnelli was impersonating Christine Petty impersonating Liza Minnelli.
I was about ready to bring her up too, because
yeah,
you and Christine Petty have given Mario Cantone a run for his money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love him. It's funny. Well, it's funny. I'm jumping ahead now, but it's very funny because when I did Forbidden Broadway, I was like kind of like the more young ingenue track, which is so funny because at 4'11", I'm never an ingenue. I'm always like the friend or the sidekick or the weird one. But I was the young ingenue track, and they wouldn't let me do Liza Minnelli. I was too young to play Liza. So I just got to watch everybody do it for years. Even in the West End, I didn't do it. So it was very funny years, like when I do Liza Minnelli, I always kind of felt like I didn't have an ownership of it because they didn't let me do it in Forbidden Broadway. But I think now I've done it long enough that I have my own Liza that I do, my own version of the impression. But going back, so for seeing Forbidden Broadway was what, and listening to those soundtracks, that was my outlet to singing impressions because, again, I'm not that old, but there was not, YouTube, it was not around forever. You couldn't just go online or go on YouTube and watch these great old impressionists and parodies. The first person I remember, first meaning like the earliest, that I remember being like, oh, they're doing an impression with their voice, and that's really cool. And it wasn't dressed up. It wasn't somebody who was dressed up like in the costume of Liza Minnelli. Was Sammy Davis Jr., who if anyone's a Christina Bianco nerd, you guys know that I always try to put a Sammy Davis Jr. song in my shows. I love Sammy Davis. He's one of my greatest heroes. And Sammy Davis Jr. would do one song in his set where he just took one song and sang it as a bunch of different people. And he would very often, when he was on tour with the Rat Pack, do the other members of the Rat Pack. And my dad told me about that. My dad played one of his albums, and that was one of the tracks was on there, where he was just changing voices, doing all his contemporaries and his fellow Rat Packers. And I was like, is this the same guy doing all these voices? But like, I certainly wasn't inspired. I was like, this is what I shall do. Like, I wish it was some story where it was like, I got bit by the bug and I knew I had to do impressions. Like, it really wasn't until I got out of college, did like a national tour, came back, had, like everybody else, struggled to get work, and saw an audition for Forbidden Broadway when I was like, I change my voice all the time. I think I could do this. Like, it wouldn't be embarrassing if I auditioned. Like, literally, it took me until I auditioned for Forbidden Broadway to even do an impression in public. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to correct myself there. See, you didn't know I was going to talk this much, did you?
Don't worry, you're doing fine.
Yeah, I'll correct myself, and then I promise I'll shut up. Somebody recently reminded me, this is why it just popped into my head, that I did an impression once randomly in New York, and it was right before I booked Forbidden Broadway, so I must have been just like trying new things. My very first cabaret, that my family came to in New York, it was at the Laurie Beachman Theater underneath the West Bank Cafe. And I did this cabaret show, singing all different styles and genres of music in my own voice, of course. But then I decided randomly that the encore, because I hated the concept of encores, should be Celine Dion singing And I Am Telling You. So somebody recently reminded me, like, no, Christina, you didn't think you were an impressionist, but you did always know you had a Celine Dion impression. And you did that to close your show. I was like, yes, I did that. And that takes me back to this time in junior high or high school where there was I was at a party and there was a Celine Dion song on the radio and I started singing along. And like, I absolutely inadvertently started impersonating her. The song was, "That's the way it is." And I always think it's funny how she said that instead of that's, with her accent. And all of a sudden people were circling around me and being like, "Do that again. Oh my God, you sound like her. Oh my God, that's so funny. Can you do that again? Put the song up, And so I think that stuck with me. So I knew I had a Celine Dion, but that was about it.
But that's one of my favorite Celine Dion songs. So, and I got to say, Celine Dion was definitely one of the centerpieces of one of the first YouTube videos that I discovered of you. It was your cover of Katy Perry's Firework, where you did various divas, not just Celine, but Barbra Streisand, Bernadette Peters, Christina Aguilera, Dame Julie Andrews, Kristin Chenoweth, and then finally Katy Perry herself. So it's one of my all-time favorite covers that you've done.
Thanks. That's a really funny one too, because at the time, I had done Forbidden Broadway, doing impressions, and then I was in this show, Newsical. It spoofs the news and pop culture. And it was like Saturday Night Live, but with music is how I would describe it. And I had all these random wigs and costumes at my disposal. And somebody, I think my agent, submitted me for what was going to be a new revamped show, the TV show In Living Color. And they wanted a reel of impressions. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I can do something fun with that. And so I made that Firework video as part of my audition for In Living Color. And, of course, I didn't get the part. And actually, very sadly, I don't think the show ended up happening. But then I was actually months later, I was like, I should just put this on the internet because it did all this work. So I might as well just put it out there. So it's such a funny thing when it got popular. I remember waking up and seeing all of these I was tagged in all of these articles from Brazil and South America because Katy Perry's really big there. And that was the first audience that discovered my video. I was like, what is happening? And it actually was that video, the Firework video. And I'm surprised that you're one of the people that saw that because most people didn't hear of me, quote unquote, until the Total Eclipse of the Heart video. But that Katy Perry Firework video, but prior to that, I had a couple of videos online like more Broadway themed because I was doing Forbidden Broadway and I started singing some. I was asked once I got reviewed, as being an impressionist in Forbidden Broadway, people kept asking me to come around various events and concerts and private parties in New York City and do impressions. And so I thought about what Sammy Davis Jr. did and what the great Christine Petty has done. Please, everyone, now go YouTube Christine Petty doing I Will Survive as 90 billion different people, and also her The 12 Divas of Christmas is hilarious. But she would take one song and do it as a bunch of different people. And so I was like, well, she did it, Sammy Davis Jr. did it, I guess I can do it myself. And so I started putting some of them out. Like This Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow is the first YouTube video with impressions I ever posted. I was at the Friars Club, the big comedy members club in New York, doing that, absolutely terrified. And I remember that video got like 100,000 views really, really quickly. And I was like, who the heck is watching this? And that is the only reason I even got Twitter. I think it was the Katy Perry video. I was like, I feel like I need to get the same handle, the same, username on all these devices and all these different apps because maybe people are going to start to pay attention. And so right after Firework, I made sure I had the only version of Christina Bianco I could get, Christina Bianco 1. I got it on Instagram and Twitter, and I made sure I had a professional Facebook page, and I made my YouTube channel was a real channel with my name on it, and I attached everything. And that video was the only reason that I had any social media presence, and everything was all linked up, which is, I mentioned this because had I not had all that linked, when my Total Eclipse of the Heart video went viral, it never would have taken off the way it did if I didn't have everything so easy to access. Like all of a sudden, everybody went directly to my Twitter, directly to my Instagram and Facebook and my newsletter, and all of a sudden I had thousands of followers overnight. So it's kids, if you're listening, definitely social media, make sure everything is clearly branded.
I agree. And by the way, I love going to the Total Eclipse of the Heart video, and this video changed your life tremendously. Because not only that, it showed you at your incredible talent, but also it helped you book ticket to Ellen, where you performed the song again for her. And then also for differently, Queen Latifah, if I remember correctly, with The Natural Woman, which you displayed your Whitney Houston, which I was like, wow!
Yeah, I had been working on a lot of other impressions, but you can't squeeze them in one song. And that's also something that's funny because everyone's like, you don't do so-and-so, you didn't do so-and-so. It's like, I cannot put every impression that I do in every single song. And for a while I was trying to do that in my shows too. Like, I need to get every single impression in. But I do like 200 impressions or so, or I mean, there's more, but I can't make a list of them. I just sort of do now it's like I just do these crazy voices from cartoon characters to newscasters or whatever. But I always try to do what I say, quality over quantity. And so Whitney Houston did not fit into a lot of the songs I did. To me, she did fit into Natural Woman, but I was a little bit, you get the insider details now. When you perform on a TV show, it's not like you're doing it on a concert where they're setting up the sound so you can hear. You know, it's not for me. I can't say I'd like more reverb and a little less piano, a little more me, with a little more low end in my monitor. You can't do that on a TV show. And so what I hear in that room is really odd. And I really felt like I was singing with, earplugs in. I couldn't hear myself. I wasn't sure if my impressions were landing at all. And then every time you watch something on TV, to make it all sound even, they compress it. And then they compress it again when it goes to air. And they compress it again when the time reaches. So it's this very compressed thing. So I listen back to all of those performances on those TV shows, and I cringe. I can barely get through that. I think all of my impressions sound absolutely rubbish. Especially that Whitney Houston. So thank you for enjoying it, because I was mortified.
Well, here's the thing. What I really admire about you is you said that you have almost 200, but like I picked out my top 8. Okay,
I'm curious to hear.
Alrighty, I have to start with Celine.
Singing? I was gonna say they're just singing impressions or speaking too. They're just singing impressions.
Both singing and speaking. Celine was definitely my favorite.
Well, thank you so much. Celine is of course the greatest singer in the world. And she is my most favorite person to impersonate because she has the funny way of speaking and the funny mannerisms and the physicality and, of course, the chest pound. So I love her. She's the best.
Alrighty. Another one of my favorites because I miss her on The Voice so much. But I saw her live in 2018 and she was at Radio City Music Hall. Amazing. The one, the only Christina Aguilera.
Christina Aguilera is such a favorite of mine. I love all the divas, and I would not, I call them the divas, these great icons. I wouldn't impersonate them if I didn't have something that I loved about them. And people always think, because I do Britney Spears in a little bit of I very much exaggerate her vocal fry, like, so people think, oh, you hate Britney. I don't hate Britney, but I will confess that I am an absolute Aguilera girl. Like, I believe Christina Aguilera is one of the greatest singers we've ever had, and I absolutely adore her and her crazy growl, which I don't know if it's going to break your microphone, but like the fact that I always say this in my shows, the fact that you don't even need to hear words to know you're listening to Christina Aguilera is my favorite thing about her. Because the only thing you need to hear is, it's like the greatest thing. You just hear a growl and you know it's her.
Yes, that was amazing, Christine. That was amazing. But then we have to get to one of the greatest divas of all time, the top, and it's Barbra Streisand.
Oh yes, the great. I'm a singer, a female singer from New York. I mean, I have no choice but to love Barbra Streisand. It's just, you come out of the womb and you know all the lyrics to her Broadway album. Like, that's sort of the way it works here.
Absolutely. And then another one that, besides Christina has range, is Kristin Chenoweth. And that one, you have to go from her, I love that her singing voice, and then when you go up to her operatic range, it's like a millisecond. It's amazing.
Thank you. Kristin Chenoweth was one of the impressions that I obviously debuted in Forbidden Broadway, and I listened to the cast album where I sang the song "Glitter and Be Glib" that they play all the time on like Sirius XM radio, and it's like the one thing I'm really known for. And they recorded that album before I really knew what I was doing with the impression. And so I hate listening to that as well. I'm like, I don't sound anything like her. I do it so much better now. It's so silly.
But what I knew I could do was that little squeaky voice that sounds like you're a little bit on helium. And To me, the fascinating thing about Kristin is that she sounds like she's this little girl.
But then she has a big soprano. That's that big jump to soprano, and that's just her. I mean, she is an absolutely astounding vocalist, and to have the dichotomy of those two sounds in one little tiny person like that it was so much fun to try to impersonate. But every time I do it, I'm like, holy God, how? And I remember when I was doing that song, Glitter and Be Glib, for those of you who don't know, it's a parody of Glitter and Be Gay, from Forbidden Broadway. You can YouTube it. I sang it 8 shows a week at the beautiful Vaudeville Theatre in London, singing this crazy schizophrenic, split vocal personality song. And I was like, what is my life? Like, when did I ever think I'd be doing this? So Kristin Chenoweth in that impression of her means a lot to me, because I think it's one of the main reasons I booked Forbidden Broadway, and one of the reasons it launched my career in the UK as well.
Okay, we got to get back to Britney, because Britney's been one of my... I grew up listening to Baby One More Time and Oops, I Did It Again, which is probably two of my all-time favorite teen pop albums ever. And I actually have a Britney Spears story to share with you a little bit.
Yeah, bring it on.
I actually ran into Britney while I was working for the X Factor USA when they were in my hometown of Kansas City. Mm-hmm. I was working with the contestants, and then all of a sudden I see I was going back to Production Central, and I see these two stylists walk in, and I looked and I turn right into video, and then I exchange eye contact with Britney Spears. The super mega fan of me went like, and then dashed out because I didn't want to get fired.
No, you had to keep your cool.
Yeah, but Britney is probably someone that I will always have a fondness for, because of her journey, the way she entertains, and everything. So you have done Britney justice.
I thank you. I mean, some people get really angry. I feel like Britney fans in general are very defensive. Actually, Christina Aguilera fans are well. There's a lot of pride. I think that also because the fans that were like the first Britney and Christina fans is like my age group, and we're older now. We're not like little kids who are like, oh yeah, I love Ariana Grande, or I love Demi Lovato or whatever, and I'm a fan. Like, we're hardcore fans, because they keep having these career resurgence. Like, they both have their names are still known because they're still putting stuff out there. And so I feel like we just love them a little harder because we've loved them a little longer. So I always try to listen when people say, you're not doing Britney justice, or you don't do Britney Spears impression enough, or whatever. So I always try to do something different and fun, which is why, I like to do what I call my unlikely interpretations and give everybody fun songs to sing that you wouldn't expect them singing. And people always like to hear Britney Spears sing like really traditional classic music, like standards or Gershwin or something like that. So
I don't think
Britney Spears singing The Sound of Music.
The sound of music.
Like, I love that stuff. So that's where Britney will always remain to me. She's always the funniest singing classic stuff because her voice is so innately like pop. So,
alrighty, we got to talk about one singer we talked about earlier, Liza. I think the thing is that I think Liza is. I'm new to the Liza fandom. I always remember her for singing "You Are Not Alone" at the Michael Jackson's 30th anniversary concert, and of course
wow, that's your memory. Wow, it's so funny how people know Liza. A lot of people only know Liza Minnelli because of other people impersonating her now, like younger generations. Like, I love Kristen Wiig to the end of the world, and everyone goes nuts over her Liza Minnelli turns off a light, and I watch that and I go, that's hilarious. It's nothing like Liza Minnelli, but it's hilarious.
I agree. I gotta say, you and
Liza
Christine,
Minnelli's like.
I gotta say, the three people that master Liza are you, Christine Petty, and Mario Cantone.
I'm in good company. Thank you very much. Thank you. There's somebody you need to look up, somebody who I think does the best Liza Minnelli impression, other than Christine Petty. No offense, Mario. And that's Trevor Ashley. He's an Australian performer, and he's an incredible vocalist, an incredible actor and comedian. And he does such an incredible Liza Minnelli. Full costume, full everything. So look up Trevor Ashley, Liza Minnelli, please, everybody.
Alrighty, so I had a very tough time picking the last spot.
Oh, boy.
there are two people I got tied, but two legendary ladies. Each of them are powerful powerhouses that can be summed up in 2 to 3 names. They are Bernadette Peters and Dame Shirley Bassey.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, okay, well, I'm surprised because you got Liza. You don't have Judy. That's okay though. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about Mama. I forgive you. I forgive you, Jake. I forgive you. But okay, so Bernadette Peters or Shirley Bassey. Well, in the U.S., Shirley Bassey isn't nearly as popular as she is in the U.K. and other areas of the world. Even Australia, she's much more popular than she is here. Most people in the U.S. know Shirley Bassey from Goldfinger, and that's about it. But she is a force of nature. Like the voice on that woman, it just can literally blow you across a room, and she can still do it today. So Shirley Bassey, in that regard, is larger than life. Crazy costumes, crazy, comes out with a boa that's like longer than the stage. I mean, this woman is the real showman like that. For me, Bernadette Peters, who I always have to impersonate as soon as I say her name, because Bernadette Peters is probably one of my earliest huge influences. I absolutely was in love with her. Again, she's an Italian New Yorker, so what's not to love for me? A petite Italian New Yorker. So again, I felt an immediate, like, I could be like her, But she was, I'm trying to think of the shows that really hit me. Huge Sondheim fan. So when I was listening to Sunday in the Park with George, I was like, who, this woman is amazing. Who is she? But the big one for me was Into the Woods. And of course, I not only listened to it, but there's that incredible video of the Broadway company doing Into the Woods. They filmed it, and remains my favorite musical and my favorite musical captured on film. And Bernadette Peters in that film singing "It's the Last Midnight," like I absolutely wore out that part of the VHS tape, rewinding it. So she's got the edge for me just from nostalgia,
I agree. The first time I heard her voice when she voiced Rita in Animaniacs, and then also when she played the wicked stepmother in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella with Brandy and Whoopi and Whitney.
I can't believe you just said that, because if there was ever anything I would have forgotten that she did, it was playing the stepmother in that Whitney Houston Cinderella. Oh my God. I cannot believe I forgot that. I got to go back and revisit.
And also, I also gotta say, I saw Shirley Bassey when she performed for Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee, so I became a fan then. And then when the Oscars brilliantly invited her for...
She just tore it up with Goldfinger, and I felt like we all love Barbra Streisand, but it was not Barbara's best night, and everyone was like, who was this woman that just sang Circles Around Streisand? I was like, oh my gosh, this is the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me.
And here's the thing.
I like
3 of your people were, one of the best photos of that Oscar season was at the after party when you had Dame Shirley Bassey, Barbara, and Adele together, all three of your acts together.
I know, it was a lot for me to handle. I was like, they did this for me. It was crazy.
Alrighty, so I have some ideas for you for future impressions, because I've always been wondered if she could do this, and I'm gonna, I don't expect you to act to impersonate them, but
no, but I promise you, I will work on these people, So I'm always curious to know just let me at them. Who are they?
I always have high respect for Kathie Lee Gifford.
Okay, so people have asked me to do it before. Here's the reason I don't do Kathie Lee Gifford. She actually has a raspy speaking voice. There's a lot of grit in her voice. If it's somebody very charactery like Liza Minnelli, I can put on sort of a thing, because it's not just about the sound of her voice. It's about her pattern, her pitch, and the way she says her T's and her S's, But for Kathie Lee, she's got a lot of rasp in her voice, and so I can't do that. Again, the brilliant Kristen Wiig found a way to impersonate Kathie Lee without voice matching, but because I'm about voice matching, I literally don't have the grit in my voice to do it. But boy, oh boy, do I love her. I love her. I've been on her show. I was on with Kathie Lee and Hoda. It was one of the best days of my life.
Absolutely. Kathie is probably one of my all-time favorite talk show hosts, and she's incredible. But however, there is one singer-songwriter that has become one of the most powerful vocals and has really, from Titanium to Diamonds, it's Sia.
Sia, okay, so here's the thing. You will all hear a Sia impression from me soon. I have been working on it for like 2 years and not working on it well. Just being like, oh, I'm not happy with it. Oh, I'm not happy with it. And then sort of letting it lie. She has a very imitable voice. She's got so many funny isms. Like sometimes she speaks as though she sings as though she doesn't even speak English. Like her pronunciation is really odd. And I just think, God, what an incredible range, what an incredible powerhouse. So I promise you guys will hear a Sia out of me soon.
Now, I know you've done Kelly Clarkson, but there's another reigning queen from the American Idol world that you haven't done, Carrie Underwood.
Okay, so I did Carrie Underwood once in the UK in my show Party of One. And at that point, Carrie wasn't as big. So I don't know if my impression was crap, or if they just didn't know her well enough. But now I know she's quite big, particularly in Scotland. Go figure. So I'm going to bring back my Kelly Clarkson impression. My Carrie Underwood impression. Ooh, I get in trouble for saying that. But I love her. I love her music. I think she's got an incredible voice. And it's a really, it's strong, almost a little harsh. And so that's a lot of fun to play with. So I'll dust off the Carrie Underwood and we'll judge it. Listen, it's a work in progress, so we'll see how it goes.
Alrighty. So what have been some of the challenges that you faced throughout your career, and how have you overcome those obstacles?
Oh boy. As an actor and a singer in my own right, like not doing impressions, everybody it's so hard to get work because no matter how talented you are, there are a million other reasons why we all do or do not get roles. For me, I have a massive problem with my height, and I say that from years of experience. I haven't been able to even audition for parts that I know I'm really right for, and it's very because of my height. And it's very frustrating to hear people and casting directors say, "Oh, we're circling back. We can't find anybody for this role." And my agent's like, "Right. Well, I've told you to see Christina Bianco," and they go, "Oh no, she's way too short. We can't see her." So that happens quite a bit. The other obstacle I face, it's sort of based on the same thing. I'm thinking of two issues, but because I can sing pop and I'm comfortable singing, contemporary pop music, and I can riff. I'm no Natalie Weiss, but I can, be in Rent and sound like I belong. I can sing jazz standards and sound like I belong. I can sing country music and sound like I was born in the South. This is the sort of thing that I do. But I also love singing traditional musical theater, and I have a soprano voice, and I have a lot of coloratura ability and notes. I was very careful to say, I'm not an opera singer. I'm not a fancy coloratura soprano, but I have those notes. And people don't know what to do with you when you are versatile like that. If you're already established in one area, like famous or well-known for one thing, and then you show you can do something else, it's very celebrated. But when you're just making a name for yourself and you're just, like one of the thousands of people auditioning every day, and you walk into a room and they ask to hear two contrasting songs from your book or whatever, and you do one like pop rock belty thing and then one like crazy soprano thing, everybody behind the desk sees you very differently. Versatility is not always celebrated just because it makes you more difficult to cast. People just don't see you the same way. So my versatility that has been such an asset to my career now, doing impressions and doing concerts, and it certainly gives me a lot more flexibility for getting work outside of theater, singing demos, singing with symphonies, just in general live a lot of different live performance. But when it comes to theater, it's actually been like a curse many, many times, because someone's like, oh, I saw her on that show. She played she sang the big soprano part. So I was like, yeah, well, I saw her as Maureen in Rent, and I only think of her as like some urban pop rock chick. And then they both go, oh, and then you don't get either part. You don't get the part. So that's been a real problem for me.
Well, here's the thing, and I gotta say, these people, these agents, and these show producers don't know what a good thing when they see it, because you're probably one of the most versatile performances, and it sucks that versatility is now is frowned upon.
Well, it's not frowned upon. It's just. And I have to be very careful about this because, everybody's doing what they think is right, and I really do understand that. There are so many people that potentially could play a million there are so many people that can play a very small, how do I word this? There are too many people for too few parts. That's what I'm trying to say. So when there's such incredible competition, I do understand why there's typing, where they, typecast, or where they type out certain people. No, we're looking for this, and no, we think we want that. And I do better when the creatives are in the audition room, when the people that wrote the show or the music director are in the room. When I'm auditioning for just the casting people, very often I'm typed out for a reason very, very quickly. And I understand that there are a lot of people to get through, and they have, that's the way that they're doing it. So I'm not criticizing that, but I do think that all the great performers that we know and love, and the ones we were just talking about, Bernadette Peters, Barbra Streisand, Patti LuPone, who's like more popular than ever now thanks to her Twitter account and all that. These women are really unique. I don't know that those women would get cast in shows today because they don't fit a mold, and everyone really does like to put you in a box today. And I think back in the day, they were a little more willing to take a chance on people that weren't already famous and people that weren't so cookie cutter, people that had a little bit of, a unique quality, a little bit of an edge to them. But again, that's also a testament to how expensive it has been to produce theater. And these days, the prices have gone up for everything. But of course, with what we're going through now, I think we're about to see many significant changes in the performing arts and in live entertainment. And hopefully that will mean lower costs and a little more creativity and a little more thinking outside the box.
I think so. I agree with you on that. And I want to talk to you about your album, Life of the Party.
Okay.
What were some of your highlights recording this album?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had always wanted, I'd been asked by a lot of people to do an album, and some people wanted it live, and some people wanted it to be something in a studio. And then I had people that wanted to produce the album, put money into it, and they all had different ideas of what they wanted it to be. It should be an album of you doing impressions. Well, I don't want a studio album of me doing impressions because that's not my voice. Why am I doing that? Well, then do, Broadway show tunes. Yeah, but I'm not really the big Broadway girl. I'm not like, Miss Les Mis or Wicked or anything. And I thought, well, can I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And everyone's always afraid of that. So I thought, the only way to really capture everything that I do and to please all the people that I already know are my fans is to just basically capture a live performance. So I'm really glad that I got to do a lot of varied material in one show, in one night, or 2 nights we recorded the album. And then the fact that doing it yourself without producers' help and all that is so expensive and so difficult. And because I was doing it for my audience and my friends and fans, I was very nervous about doing a crowd fund for it. But I thought, what the heck, what have you got to lose? It's also a really nice way to get people engaged and interested in your album, rather than just be like, oh, I'll put it out, here it is. But to give people incentive and say, hey, for whatever you want to donate, there's like a little prize, there's something you get, so if you donate this much, you get an autographed CD. If you donate this much, I will do the unlikely interpretation of your choice and send it to you in a video message. If you donate this much, I'll leave your outgoing voicemail message as Kristin Chenoweth. And it just took off, and we exceeded our goal, so we were able to put out an album that we're very proud of. The sound of the album, considering it was just a few of us in a little room, a 4-piece band is always difficult, and over 2 nights is always difficult to match sound and make it work. But we did all that, but then we were able to make fun artwork and really make the CD our first choice, as opposed to something that we were like, oh, it would have been okay if we could do this. But I'm so proud, because when I hold it, it doesn't just represent the tracks in that album to me, because it was put together and created by me and my audience of over these years. It just means a lot more. It's like I'm holding all of you when I hold the album. So it's really special to me.
And I gotta say that I'm so glad that you went with the live album route, because if you're going to include your legendary impressions, you have to play with the audience. I don't see it would be extremely difficult if I was able to be an impressionist to go in a recording studio and not without having someone to play off of.
Yeah, it only really works in another comedic way, in either a comedic way for a show like RuPaul's Drag Race, which I've done voices for, where it's like clearly a parody, or if it's something really serious, like I am voicing Judy Garland or something, in a, I shouldn't say a movie because of course we know the new Judy Garland film, everyone has their own opinions on Renee Zellweger, so I'll get off of that. But like when it's done like that, then it's different. But that's for a use where people are watching. But when you're just listening to an impression, unless it's parody like Forbidden Broadway or something like that, I don't know that it would work. But for me, having the audience's reaction was so important, because me singing "Livin' La Vida Loca" as Liza Minnelli for nobody is not the same as soon as I start hearing some chuckles, because then it makes the listener, it makes them aware, just how ridiculous it is, and it puts them in that room. That's what I wanted. I want someone who's never seen one of my live concerts to listen to that album and feel like they were in the room.
All right, speaking in the room, how about let's evolve the room to theater and in the West End. So you had the opportunity to portray Fanny Brice in a biographical musical, Funny Girl, on the West End.
Well, I'm going to correct you there
sorry.
No, it's okay, because it's considered like a West End production because of the director and the cast and the crew, but it was in Paris. So technically, when it's in Paris, you can't call it West End. So I'm just going to correct you there. But
okay, thank
but it was
you.
a big West End director and a West End cast and production team. So I mean, it was the equivalent of a West End production, just happened to be in Paris.
And don't worry, this is the first and only time I'll make a mistake on this podcast.
Sure.
So I got it, but however, it felt like you were actually that you felt like the West End with all the stuff, but like.
That's because the caliber of the production was Broadway West End quality and caliber. And because, like I said, the director-choreographer Stephen Mear is a very, very popular and famous and Olivier Award-winning and Tony-nominated director and choreographer. The set and costume designer is a West End set and costume designer. And most of my cast have all been on the West End, all British performers. So it was... as this sounds so obnoxious, but as the New York Times said, it was a ready-made Broadway product. so basically, and it got coverage, I think, because a theater in Paris is a theater like this, musical theater Paris like this is fairly new, and the only productions that they've really done have been direct West End sort of not transfers, but picking up productions and directors and talent from the West End and plopping them into Paris to create something a little bit new and different. And so that is why the UK West End scene was so invested in the show, which then, of course, got the attention of everybody here in the States, particularly New York. So even though it was a show in Paris, the fact that it was so widely reviewed by all of the main publications, including the New York Times, and so well reviewed with this big West End creative team, it was, I don't know how to put it. Yeah, I basically, even though I can't say that I played Fanny Brice in the West End, I certainly feel like I did, and the whole production has been given such respect and so many accolades, and I'm so grateful, because it was certainly the greatest theatrical experience of my life.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, were you worried about you were going to channel Barbra? Because this was probably one of her most recognizable roles. Yeah,
everybody has asked me that, and it's the boring short answer is no. I never was worried that I would ever slip into a Barbra Streisand impression. I think that's for a few reasons. One, it was a mental thing. I was like, okay, you can't sound anything like her. Meaning, not that I thought I was going to do an impression, but even if I was singing something like Christina, if I sang it and phrased it in a certain way that was similar to Barbra, just the fact that our voices, like the speed of our vibrato is similar, people might go, oh, look, she's impersonating Barbra Streisand. So I had to manage to make it my own voice without changing my own voice, but make it fresh in a new way. And so singing a lot of this iconic material, it was just a matter of my absolutely throwing everything I knew about Barbra Streisand's versions of the song out of my head for a very long time. Going back to the sheet music, looking at the real notes, we love Barbra, but she does play with the melody a lot. So going back to some of the original notes and And also, I guess going from a lyric standpoint, like once you're reading the script of a show, all of those songs, Don't Rain on My Parade, People, On the Greatest Star, when you see what the dialogue and the scenes prior that bring Fanny Brice in and out of those songs, it always will change the way you sing them, as opposed if you're just walking on the stage, singing Don't Rain on My Parade and leaving. It's just very different. So reading the script was great. The other reason it was a little bit easier to separate my knowledge of Barbra Streisand doing the part is because my knowledge of Barbra Streisand doing the part is the film. I didn't see her do it on Broadway. I was not born. And the Broadway cast album is not played as much, not even readily as accessible as the film album. And as hope lots of people know, the play is very different than the movie. And a lot of the songs in the movie were original Fanny Brice songs, but not in the musical. They're not in the musical. So there were so many songs that I don't even know Barbara singing well that were in the musical. Like I went to the cast album and I listened to it and I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to play that again because I don't want to know the way she sings and I want to now make my own way of singing it. So that was great because there was material where I didn't even know what Barbara sounded like. And I think the last thing is that I went back and studied as much about the real Fanny Brice as possible. The real Fanny Brice was super tall, super flat-chested and skinny, like a little olive oil, and made all these crazy faces and did all these funny little character voices. Like she was very popular for doing the radio character Baby Snook. And that's something that's not touched on in the story of Funny Girl at all. But the way she would change voices and make those wild faces, and the way that she didn't fit in because she was so tall with me, I'm so short, and the director played with that. I was able to approach the character in a very different way than Barbara, who did it phenomenally, iconically, and I love it till I die. But I just had to make my own Fanny Brice, so I just really tried to rely on the true story and the true lady to make my own version of it.
Alrighty, so if you had the opportunity to work with a fellow performer, who are on the top of your collaboration list, and how would they enhance your sound?
That's a really hard question that I have no idea how to answer. You're thinking singers first?
Yes, singers.
Holy Lord. I like a lot of old school vocalists. Singers who I think are incredible, not just the way they sound, not just their emotion, but vocal technicians. Like I wish I was better. I wish I was better at music theory so I could play the piano and sing at the same time, and I wish I could scat. I can scat a little bit, but not with the knowledge and the dexterity of somebody who knows the ins and outs of music and music theory. So my first go-to people would be people in the more jazz and era. Today, I would love to sing with Maureen McGovern. I love Maureen McGovern. I think she's a phenomenal vocalist. Look her up if you don't know her. Gosh, there are so many people. Maureen McGovern. On the same token, someone who I do know, who I have met, Anne Hampton Calloway. I just think she's astounding in how she interprets a song. I always go to people that I don't think of as actors first. I go to vocalists first. But now I think on the more acting end of things, my gosh, there are so many people I think are stupendously talented. But I mean, let me just go old school here and just really, who wouldn't want to work with like Bernadette Peters? I would love to work with Bernadette Peters. She's my, like I said, one of my biggest inspirations. And she's not afraid to be small with a song. This is not getting into a who did it better thing, but like if you look at the difference between like Ethel Merman's Mama Rose and Bette Midler's Mama Rose and Patti LuPone's Mama Rose, then you look at Bernadette Peters' Mama Rose. I thought it was very honest and brave to play it the way that she did, which is her choice. It's like me changing, making Fanny Brice my own. And I love the way that she was so different, yet in my opinion still so strong in the way that she acted it and sang it. And she did the same thing when she played Hello Dolly, Dolly Levi. So I would love to work with her because I think she has such an interesting take on things, particularly stepping into roles other people have played. She also did that in A Little Night Music. So for somebody who's originated so many parts and who someone like me can just impersonate and gravitate toward these iconic performances of hers, she's also somebody who can step into somebody else's shoes and make it their own. I find that really inspiring.
Awesome. So this is the second to last question.
Okay.
Okay. If you had the opportunity to meet with performers who want to showcase their talent on YouTube in hopes to further their careers, what advice would you share with them?
Basically, there is a lot of content out there where people are doing similar things. They want the same hashtag to get them popular in the same way as the 30 other people that they've just seen do that video. I think it's basically it's the same thing I said in all the interviews about why I love playing Fanny Brice, and it's the same thing I was sort of saying about versatility and being unique. Make your own way, make your own choices. Don't try to conform. Don't try to be like somebody else. Put your stuff out there, and if you have to do a couple of things like somebody else to get your foot in the door, that's fine, to get some attention, but look for what you can do that's different. If there's something you like, try to think of a way to make it different, make it your own, because being unique in a world where so many people are the same, that's what I think is going to make you special, and not just make you famous or popular or, trending for a few minutes or a few days, but to give you career longevity. So that's what I think. Always don't be afraid to be yourself and to not fit into the box a little bit. I think that ultimately it will work in your favor because you'll be more remembered than others.
Alrighty, so Christina, where can my listeners find you?
Where can everybody find me? Well, my website is ChristinaBianco.com, and there's probably more information and video links and photos on there than you'll ever want to see in your life, and that's on there. My YouTube channel, if you type in Christina Bianco into YouTube, you will see me right there with my channel. Xtina Bianco 1, that is my handle on Instagram and Twitter. And I put out a lot of fun little videos on Instagram, usually more so than on Facebook or Twitter. So do give me a follow on Instagram for some fun little stuff. And I do have a few projects in the works, but of course with everything going on right now, a lot of them are on hold. So hopefully I'll be able to announce some really cool news very shortly.
Alrighty, Christina. Okay, guys, so if you want to follow me, it's Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And also, if you want to read more of these, listen to more of these episodes, they're on Apple Podcasts and on Spreaker. Just type in Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast. And also, if you want to read more of my interviews and also read some music reviews as well, head over to jakestake.com. Once again, it's jakes-take.com. Christina, you were an absolute delight. This was probably one of my favorite episodes I've done, and this is a huge milestone episode. I'm so honored that you're a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful that you have been watching me since, so many years ago with that Firework video, and that I've kept your interest, and that what I'm doing makes you happy and brings you joy. That's what I love to do more than anything. So thank you so much for now hopefully bringing me to the attention of other people. Thank you.
You're so welcome, and Christina, and have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.